For 60 years, the world forgot about him, but on the morning his trembling hands touched a piano on a stage in Los Angeles, millions would soon realize they were witnessing something far bigger than a performance. They were seeing the resurrection of a soul. His name was Lolo Mateo, an 82-year-old Filipino man with silver hair, sunk cheeks, and eyes that carried both the weight of sorrow and the softness of a prayer. When he first stepped onto the stage of a special America's Tribute Night, a charity event broadcast across the United States, people whispered, "Who was he? Why was an old man limping toward a piano? Why did he keep one hand pressed gently to his heart as if he feared it might fall apart?" Nobody knew that his story began decades earlier, inside the unforgiving walls of Manila's biggest prison. At age 22, Mateo was wrongfully convicted of a crime he didn't commit. A theft gone wrong, a case of being at the wrong place, at the wrong time, with no money for a lawyer who cared. The doors slammed behind him, and the world outside simply moved on. His parents died before his name was cleared. Friends forgot him. Technology changed. Presidents came and went. Manila transformed, but time for Mateo stayed frozen inside a concrete cell. But even in darkness, a small miracle survived. There was an old, cracked piano in the prison chapel. No one knew how it got there. Some said a priest brought it decades ago. Others claimed it was abandoned during a typhoon. To Mateo, it was heaven's doorway. Every evening he would approach it quietly, sit on its uneven bench, and teach himself to play by listening, by feeling, by trusting the tiny light his spirit still held. The keys were chipped. Some notes didn't work, but Mateo's music made them sing anyway. In those moments, he was no longer a prisoner. He was a son again. A dreamer, a believer. He played for the God who was the only witness to his tears, the only one who heard him whisper that he still had hope. Years passed, then decades, then half a lifetime. And one day, the truth finally came. New evidence surfaced. Witnesses confessed. The record was overturned, and the gates opened not with celebration, but with the quiet apology of a world too late to repair what it had taken. At 82, he stepped outside for the first time as a free man. No family waited, no friends, only journalists curious about the old man who lost 60 years. But they didn't know that Mateo didn't want pity. He wanted a purpose. A nonprofit group in the U.S. heard about him and invited him to a charity event to share his story. They offered him a chance to speak, but he made only one request. "I want to play one piece," he said softly. "A piece for God." So now, inside a packed theater filled with Americans who only knew a few lines about him, Mateo stood quietly beside the piano. Lights dimmed. Cameras focused, a silence spread thick, curious, expectant. Then he sat down. His fingers hovered above the keys like birds remembering how to fly, and with a slow, trembling breath he began. The first note was soft, so soft that the room leaned in as if trying not to miss a heartbeat. Then came the next, and the next. Each one carried the weight of nights he cried into his pillow, mornings he prayed for a miracle. Years he watched other men receive visitors while he sat alone. But underneath the sorrow, something else was rising. Something warm, gentle, forgiving. It was gratitude. His melody swelled, growing stronger, fuller, braver. It was as if he was pouring 60 years of silent prayers into the world all at once. Every note shimmered with the resilience of a man who refused to let bitterness win. The audience didn't just hear music, they felt confession, forgiveness, redemption. Cameras captured the faces of people crying openly. A Marine veteran wiped his eyes. A young woman clutched her chest. Even the judges, known for being composed, sat utterly still, as if Mateo had reached inside each of them and pressed gently on old wounds they didn't know still hurt. Halfway through the piece, something unexpected happened. The piano suddenly produced a sharp, discordant sound, a broken key that refused to play. Gasps rippled through the room. Technicians glanced at each other, unsure how to fix it. But Mateo didn't stop. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he adjusted mid-melody. He shifted octaves, rewove the rhythm, and breathed life into the mistake as if it belonged there all along. The broken key that threatened to ruin the moment became the turning point of the piece. It was a reminder, a powerful, unspoken message. Life breaks, people break, but beauty can still rise, and that realization swept through the room like a wave. When the final note floated into the air, it lingered like a prayer. Then silence, deep, reverent silence, held the entire theater. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the first person stood, then the next. And within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding through tears. One of the judges stepped onto the stage, unable to hide the emotion on her face. "Sir, you didn't just play music," she whispered. "You restored something inside all of us tonight." Mateo smiled gently, the kind of smile only someone who has lived through storms can give. "I played," he said, "to thank the one who sat with me when the world forgot." His voice was frail but steady. Honest. The judge pressed the golden tribute button, not just for talent, but for the sheer power of human spirit he had shown. Golden confetti fell around him like a blessing he had waited his whole life to receive. The old man closed his eyes, raised his face slightly upward, and whispered something only God could hear. Behind the stage, people rushed to embrace him. Strangers thanked him for reminding them of faith, forgiveness, and endurance. And for the first time in 60 years, Mateo felt something he thought had been stolen forever. He felt seen. Weeks later, videos of his performance reached millions across America. People shared stories of their own losses, their own struggles, their own broken keys in life. Many said his music gave them courage to face one more day. Donations poured in for prison reform. Churches replayed his performance during Sunday services. Families sat down together to watch him, rediscovering gratitude they had forgotten. And Mateo, he didn't seek fame, or money, or attention. Instead, he visited small community centers, hospitals, and schools across the U.S., playing for anyone who needed comfort. He told them the same thing he had learned in the quiet of a prison chapel. When life closes every door, leave a window open for hope. It can enter through the smallest crack. Before returning home to the Philippines, he gave one final performance in a small church in California. Only a handful of people attended, but he played with the same devotion, the same honesty, the same love. When he finished, a young boy approached him. "Sir," the boy said shyly, "will I ever be able to play like you?" Mateo knelt slowly, resting a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Play with your heart," he said. "The hands will follow." As the boy hugged him, Mateo felt years of loneliness melt away. In that tiny moment of connection, he understood something profound. Even a life filled with suffering can become a light for others. He had lost 60 years, but what he gave the world afterward carried more weight than a lifetime of freedom ever could. He boarded his plane home quietly, with no crowd waiting, no celebration. Just piece a piece here, note by note, prayer by prayer. And as he looked out the window at the clouds drifting below, he whispered one final message that echoed the heart of his journey. No matter how long the night, the sun always finds you. He closed his eyes, letting that truth settle into his soul. And somewhere across America, millions of people who heard his story felt a little more hopeful, a little more inspired, and a little more certain that the human spirit, no matter how battered, can rise again and again and again.